Hello. Hello. Good morning.
You are muted, Dr. Lye.
Oh, okay. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Give me 1 second.
I'm trying to see what person this particular relates to. Trevor. I keep track of who comes to which one.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Good morning. So we are starting what is often considered the most difficult part of this whole text, which is chapter 9, the chapter on wisdom. In fact, in a recent publication of a traditional commentary on this Bodhicharyavatara, they published 2 books. One book has all the other chapters, and then a second book, the commentary for only the wisdom chapter. And the other chapter is like this thick, the other chapters. It's like that book is, I don't know who can carry it around. You place it on the table and then, you need a heavy thing to kind of keep the pages open and then you read. It's a really big, intimidating book. The wisdom chapter is its own book. Because in this chapter, Shantideva addresses prevailing views regarding ultimate reality, conventional reality, the relationship between ultimate reality and conventional reality, the relationship between the mind and what the mind perceives. All of that Shantideva addresses in this chapter here, chapter 9. Chapter 9 in some ways, its kind of focus is in some ways so different from the other chapters that even some Western scholars have speculated that this chapter may be introduced later, kind of inserted into this text. Although, while they have suspected that and tried to prove that, it remains the general consensus, even among the scholars, that chapter 9 was originally part of this text. There may be extra stanzas, extra verses that were introduced at a later point. Because even in the early stories about how this text came about and how this text circulated, there are accounts of how between the Buddhist communities in northern India and the Buddhist communities in southern India, various versions of Bodhicharyavatara were circulating, even within Shantideva's lifetime. So there were disputes as to who has the original text. And so tradition has it that Shantideva was finally asked, and then he said, "This one," and I forgot which one is this one. Then the Tibetan translation is longer than the Indian Sanskrit version that still exists today. So the Indian Sanskrit version that exists today may represent a different transmission of this text. Yeah, so the history and the development of this text is somewhat complex. This is just some kind of historical background to understanding. For me, knowing that these variants existed, I think can help us to not fall into a too rigid attitude towards how to read this text. Although, again, especially chapter 9 has become a place where the scholastic tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, different monastic scholars have used chapter 9 to carve out kind of an identity for themselves, to say, well, we are different from you guys because we understand this to say this, whereas you understand that to say that. So there are lots of disputations that have surrounded chapter 9 in the Tibetan Buddhist world. In the scholastic tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, which is a strong tradition, the scholastic tradition, they are capable and often thrive on disagreement. And in fact, sometimes tongue-in-cheek and, serious, but also tongue-in-cheek, very strong words of teasing is used when you dispute and you debate your opponents. Sometimes really strong, like, something like, it appears, and they rarely directly say who they are critiquing. But if you're educated, you know who they're talking about. And so that's part of the kind of expectation, the kind of the style of writing. I think in part that has to do with, if you don't know who they're talking about, then you have no business reading about this dispute. Then leave this alone. It's not your domain. Right? You practice the Dharma without needing to get into these disputations. But if you're going to get into these disputes, then if you cannot tell who they're talking about, then go back to learning more before you enter this. So there is an internal logic to some of the things that they do. But they will even, use expressions like, and it looks like this all-knowing, so sarcasm, because this opponent could be someone that other people have used the term all-knowing to refer to them, which is not taken literally, all-knowing, like the Christian God is all-knowing, but rather that it's such a learned person. So there's an expression in Tibetan, a term called kunkien. But then you may have a detractor in these disputations on chapter 9 that will say, and so, Kunkien, when he said this, maybe was had a bad night and didn't sleep well, and so then came up with this disposition, which if he really did say this, then some black magic must have happened so that their ass have been turned into their mouths. Oh yes, you have statements like this. Quite common, in these kind of scholastic disputations, and these monastic scholars love, this name calling, and but then very serious, debate is going on. There is one story about, I forgot exactly who, but in recent, meaning like before Tibet fell, in the early 1900s, maybe late 1800s, there was a Kempo, one of these scholar monks, uh, who went from eastern Tibet to central Tibet and joined the debate circles of central Tibet. The debating circles of central Tibet are mostly members of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's lineage, the Gelugpas. And the Gelugpas pride themselves in being good debaters, which means that they specialize in a branch of learning called pramana, which is often translated as logic, but it's really maybe less the Western philosophical tradition called the logicians, but more like reasoning. So using reason. And of course, every system of logic, every system of reason has its own, constituting rules. And so anyway, the Gelugpas are known for those who thrive in debate. In fact, their schools of learning is called Lobdra. Lobdra. Lo is reasoning, logic. So these are logic schools. Whereas the schools of learning of the other lineages tend to be called Shedra. She meaning knowledge. So the knowledge schools. So of course in both the logic schools, the debating schools and the knowledge schools, you learn, you gather knowledge, and you also reason, you also debate. But whereas the non-Gelugpa institutions of learning may dedicate 2 hours a day maximum to debating, to formal debate, usually done in the evening after dinner. They will come out in the courtyard. In the Gelugpa tradition, they could spend up to 6 hours each day debating. They spend less time memorizing texts, but more time debating. So anyway, the story goes that there was a Kempo who did so well with his debates that he dared to enter, the dragon's lair, meaning he went all the way to Lhasa to put himself in the midst of the master debaters. And he went there and he debated them. And according to this story, which is a real account, he defeated everyone that was in central Tibet, debating some point found in chapter 9. So he won to the shock of many people. And of course, the Gelugpa authorities was very annoyed that, the people who don't know how to debate produce someone who could, defeat everyone that we had. And I read about this account from the winning side. And it said that one of the traditions is that the one who wins the debate, right, when he leaves the debate courtyard, the victor, what happens is like the one who has lost the debate have to take off their scholastic hat, which is like this yellow hat. They have to take the scholastic hat and put on the ground for the victor to walk on as he leaves the debate courtyard. Yeah, so pretty public kind of humiliation, uh, which is the Asian way of inspiring people. Okay, so the dragon mom or whatever, tiger mom or whatever, it also exists in the monastery. Yes.
I have a question. How
Can't hear you.
are they?
Can't hear.
I'm sorry. Now can you hear me?
You're going in and out.
There's
Who judges the debate?
Oh, everybody! It's very obvious if you have lost.
Okay.
Yes, yes, because these logic, it's not like your presidential debate, okay? No. Very strict rules, this is the kind of debate where you are being set a trap to end up with a ridiculous position. And hundreds of people are surrounding, cheering and booing. So there is no need for a panel of judges to decide. It's very clear who has lost and who has won. It's this kind of debate. It's like the Tibetan Buddhist gladiator, Like, did the lion win? Did the gladiator win? Well, it will be obvious. So anyway, apparently this Kempo, he beat everyone, and so then everyone had to put down their scholar hats, and it said that he felt that he should not walk on all these hats, and so he snuck. So he snuck out from the back door. But the Lama telling this story said, everybody at home said, oh, he did well until he refused to walk on the hats of these other scholars. Because if he had done that, then the scholastic tradition would flourish in our tradition. Yeah, so there's a lot of kind of pride, when it comes to the ability to defeat someone in debate. This kind of debate within monastic circles. So part of the why chapter 9 is difficult. If you ask me, I feel that it's difficult because it has become a lightning rod for the different traditions. And even within tradition, that's the other thing. It's not as monolithic as you think. It's not the case that, the Nyingmapas, they all accept this position. The Gelugpas, they all accept this position. The Kagyupas, they all accept this position. Yes, there are general consensus, but even within the lineage, there can be very strong positions held that would differ one from the other. Sometimes including the reincarnation of so-and-so debating the writings of his previous incarnation. Like writing a critique of the writings of your previous incarnation to show how he got it wrong. Yeah, so this is not, it doesn't need to just be understood as a sectarian thing. You would even write to dispute your past life. So my point is there's a robust tradition of intellectual kind of prowess, showing your intellectual power, including no one is spared, including your past lifetime. You would critique, you would debate, you will dispute. But that in some ways has contributed to chapter 9 being read in such a complicated way. So I also feel, having said all of this, that there is maybe an easier way to read chapter 9, and that not just for the sake of easy, I think someone from the tradition will say, so you mean you just want to take the easy way out? No, what I'm saying is there is a less complex, let's put it that way, there is a less complex and less informed by this whole history of intellectual debates surrounding chapter 9. There can be a much more practice-oriented, contemplative approach to chapter 9 that you can sidestep all the more systematic debate and disputation that has surrounded chapter 9. Again, because chapter 9 has such a history of being the ground of disputation, and so this famous Buddhist teacher, Pema Chodron, her commentary on Bodhicayyavatara, No Time to Lose, leaves out chapter 9. It's like, not touching that one. I think, she was influenced by this mainstream attitude to chapter 9. I think she's more than capable of reading chapter 9 in a more contemplative way, sidestepping all the disputations. So since we neither have the skill and probably nor the interest in getting into these formal disputations about how chapter 9 should be understood, I think we don't need to go in that direction. Yeah, so chapter 9. Wisdom, even the title of this chapter. So this is in Tibetan is Sherab, in Sanskrit is Pranya, Pranya. Nya is in Tibetan is She. So it's knowledge, it's knowing. So as a verb, then it's to know. As a noun, it's knowledge. And rap or pra, rap in Tibetan and pra in Sanskrit, pranya. Pra is heightener. So in other words, super knowing or super knowledge. Rap, sherab. So it's more literally than the title of this is like superior insight, superior understanding. So when we say, Buddhas have perfected wisdom and have perfected compassion, what we are saying is they have gained full superior understanding, superior insight into the reality about phenomena and the reality about mind. Mind is internal, phenomena is that which is other than mind. In this way of dividing, right? Knowing the mind, so knowing the one that is grasping and what is being grasped, which is phenomena. Yes, so, and And this wisdom, this prajna and sherab, is also the six of the six perfections of the six going beyonds, which is translated as perfections, paramita. Paramita, literally, it's explained as going beyond. So it's that which will let us go beyond confusion and therefore beyond suffering, of which there are six areas, six going beyonds. And the sixth one is the one that we here call wisdom or superior understanding, superior insight. And so here, Shantideva says, all these branches of the doctrine, and by that, he was referring to everything that he has talked about leading up to right here. He said, all of these, the enlightened sage, the Buddha, expounded for the sake of wisdom, for the sake of giving rise to superior understanding, superior insight. So it's in service of leading us to gaining superior insight that the Buddha taught all the things that Shantideva summarized in all the chapters that came before this. In all the contents of the first 8 chapters, they were taught for the sake of leading to prajna, to sherab. Therefore, they must cultivate this wisdom who wish to have an end of suffering. So this reminds us of the basic framework of the Buddha's teachings. Other religions have other types of frameworks for what is the problem and what is the solution. In the Buddhist context, the problem is identified as the problem of dukkha, suffering. The solution is the end of dukkha, putting an end. Is it possible or not? The Buddha, through his own experience and then through his own example, showed that it is possible to become completely free from this dukkha. In order to be free from this dukkha, what we normally translate as suffering, which has a much broader range of meanings than this word that suffering connotes. Everywhere, everything on this spectrum, from what we may call stress, trauma, disease, and then I have my own vocabulary. It's called, my fancy word for the most subtle type of suffering is called just feeling that is the most subtle kind of suffering. The suffering of and then aggregates and grow and grow, and it becomes and then from it aggregates, and then now we have all the problems that we have. So the problem is dukkha. Dukkha has a cause, and the cause is grasping, thirsting. Grasping that is the result of not seeing clearly, not having the right view, the right sight, the right insight, the right understanding. And therefore, prajna, this superior insight, superior understanding, this wisdom is what we need to achieve if we want an end to suffering. That's the first stanza of chapter 9. You must cultivate this wisdom. You must cultivate this wisdom. So it's something active. It's not passively acquired. We have to cultivate, right? The word cultivate in English, as well as its original in Sanskrit, which often is translated as meditate on. And now, do yourself a favor, pick up all your Buddhist books in English. Every time you come across meditate on, cross that out and write cultivate. Meditate on loving kindness. That gives a very passive connotation, as if loving kindness is like a bowl, an object that already exists out there. Now I'm going to meditate on loving kindness. Loving kindness. Loving kindness. Ooh, loving kindness, Or wisdom. Ooh, wisdom. Meditate on wisdom. Yes, wisdom. No. We need to cultivate that. And both in Sanskrit and Pali and in English, cultivate is a verb used most commonly, originally by farmers. Farmers who till the land, who grow seeds in the land, who pull out weeds that are competing with the crop that you're trying to cultivate. And then you harvest at the end. Buddha himself used this metaphor as the main metaphor for what the path consists of. It consists of the same kind of skill and the same kind of patience, the same kind of attention, the same kind of determination, the same kind of skill that is comparable to the work of farmers. The need to till the land, the need to prepare land really well before you put precious seeds, These days, people treat seeds like it's, I had a friend, an older friend, who was a French woman, used to live around town. And she would come and cultivate a little square in my backyard. And watching her in early spring, planting. And she takes up one seed and put in. And she said, that's how, growing up in France, she called herself a French redneck. And she said, seeds are very precious. We saved from last season. Now people just go online, click, 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 and then a whole bag of seeds come. They have no appreciation for that. I said, no, you put one seed in, cover it, one seed in, cover it, one seed in, cover it. And so before you put the seeds in, you need to prep the land. So she would plant cover crops, wheat, to introduce nitrogen into the ground before. So a lot of this kind of work we have to do before we put in the seed that is so precious. You want to make sure that your land has the best conditions for this seed to germinate. After the seed has germinated, right? There are imposters growing around it. So you need to know which is the weed and which is what you planted. And pull out the weeds, right? So this metaphor of cultivating for the inner work we need to do, for spiritual work we need to do, It's a very helpful metaphor. Relative and ultimate, these, the two truths, are declared to be. The ultimate is not within the reach of intellect, for intellect is said to be the relative. And so this stanza is often quoted. Relative and ultimate, these are the two truths that the Buddha taught. So Buddha said that there is the relative truth, which is based on everyday commonsensical experiences, and then there is the ultimate truth, which can only be seen if you investigate, if you look deeper beyond the surface. Eventually, the relative truth, what's called relative here, is further kind of explained as having, there are two types of relative. One connotation of relative is that it's deceptive. That's one connotation. That which is relative because on some level what it shows points away from its truth and therefore deceptive. So what appears, right, what it shows, has an element that is pointing away from the truth of its existence. In other words, an object, we are seeing the relative truth of what I'm holding here in my hand. The deceptive part about what I'm holding in my hand here is the part that is pointing away from the composite and impermanent nature of this object. And therefore, it has an element of deception. Yeah, not deception by some evil force out there, but deception that is the mistaken perceptions that we, beings who are not Buddhists, by definition have. And that's our problem. So when the word relative truth is used, one side emphasizes the deceptive nature of things. But there's a second meaning to relative truth, which does not emphasize the deceptive aspect, but rather emphasizes the relative aspect, as we would use the word relative. Meaning, it exists only because something else exists. So it's relative to something else. So the second meaning of relative, you could say, don't have any value judgment on it, on things. Simply pointing out the interdependent nature of things. When something exists, it exists in relation to something else, and therefore relative. So if you want to be very precise, right, in translating the original word, kunzop in Tibetan, or samvriti in Sanskrit, depending on context, sometimes you would translate as this is a relative truth, and that's where you're not making any judgment. You're not saying that, oh, there's something that you can't trust about this. So in English, maybe we can say relative, right? We're emphasizing the relational, quality of whatever it is. But when the emphasis is there is something deceptive about it, which is the part where I said there's something about this perception when you look at this. That what we see, if you know what you're looking at, you're like, oh, it's a wooden bowl. It's an interesting looking wooden bowl. So this perception is pointing us away from its composite nature, its impermanent nature, its essenceless nature. And when that is emphasized, I guess in English we could say conventional truth, meaning its existence is merely based on conventions that we accept, and those conventions could very well be false as it pertains to its actual status. Its actual status is impermanent. Its actual status is its momentariness. Its actual status is its unstable nature. But we don't see that when we see this, when we perceive this, when we touch this, when we use this. We impute stability and permanence to this. That's when the relative truth is deceptive. Ultimate truth, very little debate there. So this is what's interesting. You would think that they would be debating the ultimate truth. Because, why? Because, as Shantideva says here, and he's not the first to say that, of course, but as he says here, the ultimate is not within the reach of intellect, for intellect is part of the relative. Which is ironic, right? All the scholastic traditions and all the intellectual energy of Tibetan Buddhism has gone into debating the status of the relative. How relative is relative? If it is relative, is it always conventional? Meaning, if something is relative, is it by definition deceptive? Debates there for sure. So all the debates tend to surround issues about the relative. Because Shantideva made it also not possible for the ultimate to be debated, because the ultimate doesn't lie within the reach of the intellect. In this light, within the world, two kinds of people are observed. There are two types of people. Those with yogic insight and the common run of people. In this regard, the views of ordinary folk are undermined by yogis who themselves are in the world. So there are those with yogic insight. What is yogic insight? It's the kind of insight that directly perceives, that has wisdom, direct perception, not mitigated by the veils of confusion that you and I have. So Shantideva here says, Those with direct yogic insight, they undermine all the perceptions, the views, the opinions, the philosophies, the logic of common ordinary folk. Within whose ranks the lower in degrees of insight are confounded by the higher, by means of the examples that the yogis and the worldly both accept, and for the sake of the result, analysis is left aside. It's saying that, those with direct perception of the truth about things, they don't even use reasoning. In other words, they don't need to use logic. Which again, is kind of ironic, that so much debate has surrounded chapter 9, when at least the beginning of chapter 9 says, stop debating. But I want to suggest to you, it's not either or. Right? If you do it that way, you are also caught up in this kind of thinking. Yeah? It's 1 or 0, right? This binary bind that we put ourselves in. If it is 1, it is not 0. If it is 0, it's not 1. That's the realm of the intellect. When ordinary folk perceive phenomena, they look at them as real, not illusory. This then is the subject of debate, where ordinary and yogis differ. Yogis here are referring to not just common practitioners, but those with wisdom, those who have direct knowledge of the way things are, and not simply intellectual information. All things are empty by nature. All things are not stable by nature. All things don't have an essence by nature. All those is still part of the intellect. Whereas yogis directly have experience. Indeed, things are without essence. Indeed, things are not self-arising, but interdependently arising. Indeed, things don't have essences. Indeed, things are illusory-like. They have direct experience of that. Forms and so forth, which we all perceive, exist by general acclaim, but not by valid reasoning. Meaning, so long as we not look deeper than just the superficial, then they exist by general acclaim, general consensus. This is wood. Ah, yes, wood. Oh, this is meant to be a ball. Oh, yes, a ball. So things exist based on general acclaim. And that is about the level of reality we can give anything that we perceive. And here it says, but not by valid reasoning, meaning they exist, pretty concretely, pretty clearly, so long as you don't poke around, which is here technical term valid reasoning. As long as you don't go poking around this bubble will be functional enough. But when you look deeper, then that solid existing bowl is no longer so solid. They are false, meaning what we perceive. So here, Shantideva is treating the relative more as what I would translate as the conventional, because he's emphasizing the deceptive aspect at this point. And that will change. That relative reality has a deceptive quality to it, is what he's pointing out here. They are false, just like, for instance, unclean things regarded in the common view as pure, meaning that which is unclean, right? We have foolishly considered to be pure and pristine, to be clean. But that's merely out of confusion. But that he might instruct the worldly, the common folk, our protector, meaning our Buddha, spoke of things. But these in truth lack even momentariness. And so here Shantideva says, for the sake of working with beings with lesser understanding, lesser insight, the Buddha did talk about things existing, phenomena existing. Right? Here is basically saying, but when the Buddha says, things exist, or he speaks as if things truly exist, he is just using language in a practical way, but not using language in an ultimate way. So here it says, that, but in truth, they lack even momentariness. And what is this momentariness? Momentariness is said to be the basic understanding among Buddhists with regards to what is the status of anything and everything, whether your mind, whether this table, whether this chair, whether this tea bowl, whether this little teapot, they only have momentary existence. And you're like, whoa, doesn't feel like that. But here it's saying, all that you can account for is one moment. What moment? This moment. Okay, gone now. This moment. Then next, this moment, this moment, this moment. All right? I mean, when we talk about past and future, it's just conceptual. And past and future is based on what? I think I've asked this question before. Past and future is based on what?
It's based on mental formations, yeah.
More directly, based on what? Past and future is based on?
Thinking.
Yeah, sure, mental formation, thinking, but even more simply, present. Now, we need to prove the existence of present. And how are we going to prove the existence, the veracity of present? By summoning what? The sketchy witnesses called past and future. It feels like, some of the, what do they call? Double authentication of identity when you try to do something online. And they say, you need to prove who you are. I was like, well, that is the problem I'm trying to solve. It's like, so you need to go, do this other thing to prove that you are who you are. I was like, well, that's the problem. I couldn't do that thing. That thing says I need to prove who I am.
Right.
So past, present, future are concepts. Even be here now, that bumper sticker. It's not possible. Be here now. Now when? Now. What happened to now? Well, it slipped into then. Well, we can't even account for now, much less account for then. Or account for later. Yeah, so momentariness is a way of explaining. At best, things exist only momentarily. But here, what the exercise we just did is Shantideva's point. But even that momentariness cannot really be upheld in a court of law. If you want these witnesses to come and testify. Why? Because they are all concepts. Because these in truth lack even momentariness. Now, if you say it's wrong to claim the momentary as relative, there is no fault. Okay, he says, I can go along with you. Why? Because for momentariness is relative to those who know, the yogis. But to those who don't know, these worldly beings, they would consider it as ultimate. The next two lines, it's complicated. Were it otherwise, the common view could fault the yogic insight into corporal impurity. For now, we can leave that alone. I promise you we'll come back to it, but too much right now. Those two lines. Also, in this chapter, Shantideva will say, in the end, Buddhas don't have a quarrel with. Buddhas are not trying to pick a fight with how people commonly think about tables, chairs, house, bowls, That's not the problem. And it says, in the end, whatever people commonly accept, Buddhas, those who know, will be okay enough to also accept. Yes, this is a house. That's not a house. That's a car. That's a bench. That's a dog. No quarrel there. Where there is quarrel, where the Buddhas will disagree, is the nature of these things. We habitually think that their nature is stable, solid, self-existing. Buddhas, the yogis, those who know that that is not the case. And that is sometimes what we call emptiness, which is not nothingness. If you are feeling lost, so this is also an analogy given. It sounds kind of strange at first, but it says, if you feel that you are lost, have you considered that this feeling is in part due to you holding on to a concept that there is a fixed direction? In other words, you cannot be lost if you don't have a concept of somewhere. It's very simple. So why do we find it so, I don't know, this is so confusing? I think it has to do with because emotionally we don't want to accept these truths. So then our emotions hire these mercenaries called logic and understanding to come fight this war for us. Not for us, for the emotions. In fact, these words are actually very simple. Now, the meaning is also very simple, actually. But because they are so simple and so threatening, more importantly, to our emotions, our afflictive emotions, we find these words so difficult. So don't think about it. Try to intuit what Shantideva is saying. Try to intuit. Think a little bit, yes, but don't think too much. Try to kind of emotionally lean into, not intellectually lean into. In other words, a willingness to be vulnerable in saying, I don't know, but I'm going to lean into it and intuit what he's saying here. There'll be enough to also think about, for sure, but don't think too much. Yeah, your Thanksgiving fullness, you were hoping to get some relief here. Now you've been stuck with a different kind of fullness that you're trying to digest, which all just leads to There are several books that has been published with commentaries, explanations of chapter 9. Not a bad idea to try to read some of that. Maybe the one that is most, not that it's easy, but maybe most less wordy, less lengthy, is this commentary that has been published by the same translators, actually, the same group. And they translated Khenpo Kunsang Pelden's commentary. It's called, what is the commentary? Let me search here. It's called Nectar of Manjushri's Speech, correct? The Nectar of Manjushri's Speech. Huh. That book, yeah. Nectar of Manjushri's Speech, a detailed commentary of Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva. That book, makes it, somewhat digestible. So you may want to supplement this, with a little bit of that. Also,
Dr. Lye,
yes.
this question, this term impurity, do we understand that as delusion?
No, here is not talking about that. Yeah, here is not talking about that. In any case, ignore those 2 lines. So then there is a set of recordings on the Drikung Dhammakirti YouTube channel where the whole series of the entire Bodhicharyavatara that I taught during the pandemic, you can look for, the wisdom section. If you go to Drikung Dhammakirti YouTube channel, hundreds and hundreds of recordings there. But the whole Bodhicharyavatara is there. And sometimes I guess you all listen to that, I think. Yeah. So you can go and try to get some from there. But overall, this whole chapter, if we can just kind of on the surface get the main points, that's sufficient. There's another book called, which was published many years ago, which is His Holiness the Dalai Lama's commentary. I think it's called Lightning in the Dark. A Flash of Lightning in the Dark of Night. A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. A flash of lightning in the dark of night. This book is a commentary of the Bodhicharyavatara, but instead of every stanza being addressed, His Holiness just picked out the stanzas that he feels to be the most relevant and applicable to, general audience. And so when you look at what stanzas he picked from chapter 9, that is also one way for you to say, okay, I'm just going to digest these first because, such an authority as the Dalai Lama has determined that these are the verses that we can begin with. Then the more intricate, debates that are going on in there, for now we can sidestep. A flash of lightning in the dark of the night. So today we will end here. You are going to be on your own for a little bit. I'm traveling to Guatemala. So next Sunday, for sure, I won't be able to make it. The following Sunday, maybe. I don't know yet. I'm just going for a very short visit to Guatemala. But next Sunday, I'll be leading a retreat there. Ta-ta. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Dr. Lye.
Yeah.
Thank you.